I find with knitting, though, as an advantage in comparing to other crafts is that number one, it's very portable. You can have it in your bag. You can literally knit anywhere. Anywhere. You don't have like a heavy gear to transport. I mean, you cannot do ceramic on a plane. You can knit on a plane. You're not going to paint in the subway. I mean, you can try painting in the subway if you want, but I don't necessarily recommend that.
Welcome back to the Running Wine Mom podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Cieslinski, aka the Running Wine Mom. Today's episode is one that truly threads together purpose and creativity, literally. I'm joined by Julie Lagaüzère, the incredible founder of Brooknit Bonneterie, a Brooklyn-based brand that's bringing French elegance and handmade joy back into our busy modern lives, one knitting knit at a time. We talk about everything from reinventing yourself after 17 years in the corporate world to why knitting isn't just a hobby, it's a form of self-care, a community builder, and a legacy maker. Whether you've never picked up a pair of needles in your life or you dream in yarn and pearl stitches, this conversation is for anyone who's ever wondered what it looks like to build a business rooted in passion, tradition, and heart. So without further ado, let's welcome Julie.
Hi, Samantha. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. And we met at the Bebe Foodie event. Well, I think for the second time, maybe the first time we met at the Prego Expo and then at the Bebe Foodie event, which was great to talk with you and get to know you a little bit more intimately in that situation.
Absolutely. The Prego Expo was a little intense and, running fast and going from one spot to another. So we had a little more time at the launch of Bebe Foodie app, which is from my friend Lucy, who is French too. That's probably a connection there.
Yes, I met so many French American women, and it was just nice to see how wonderful the community was. And I mean, that whole day was just wonderful. I loved every second of it. So to start each episode, we have our wine, and win of the week segment. This is where we share our favorite bottle of wine, vent about something that's been bothering us, and celebrate our recent victories. So grab a glass, take a deep breath, and let's get started. So, Julie, what is your wine drink of the week?
So my wine drink of the week is actually a wine that I will not have with me this week at all. So to give you a little bit of background, I actually grew up surrounded by winemakers. My family was into winemaking. My dad he's retired now, but he was a director of a wine cooperative in the southwest of France near Bordeaux. So one of my favorite one is actually one of his from the cooperative, which is a Sauvignon Blanc white wine, very fresh. And as we get into spring and, sunny, warmer afternoons, I'm kind of craving a little bit this wine right now. So it's not the one I can get, but that's the one I wish I could. And as an alternative, I will go for something like a Sancerre Blanc, which is, same grapes, Sauvignon Blanc, not the same location, but, kind of close enough for my taste.
I love a crisp Sauvignon Blanc in the summer. It's like my favorite way to always unwind with it.
It's like easy and refreshing and
Yeah. So what is your WHINE of the week, your complaint?
Yeah. So I actually, yesterday for Mother's Day, I gifted myself with stuck in my back. So I have like back pain. And that's the thing that I know is going to be, my winning thing for the week because it's not going to go over like tonight. So I'm going to carry that for the week. I'm used to, this kind of little, like a rock in your shoes. Instead, it's the back. But so it's going to be okay. But that's, the downside of starting the week.
Yeah, I hope it gets better quickly. Well, what is your win of the week?
So my win of the week, because it's Monday today, so I don't know when you're going to broadcast the podcast, but today is Monday, so I don't have a win yet. It's too early in the week. So I'm going to go back into win like a couple of weeks ago. So I have an 8-year-old daughter, and it's been like the longest time for her to get to ride her bike. She couldn't get to do it. And finally, a couple of weeks ago, she did it. And I felt like, a few pounds of, heaviness went away from my shoulder. I was like, okay, that's done. And that was a big win. So it's technically her win, but I felt it was also my win.
Well, yeah, you had to teach her how to do it and cheer her on, right? So I always like to ask my guests, what is one significant challenge you've successfully navigated, shaping your journey to where you are today?
Wow, one challenge. I think it was probably the transition from, the corporate world and my former career into becoming an entrepreneur, because the mindset is really different, because you shift, you have to shift from having some people above you, quite a few. I was not that senior anyway. And objectives and, tasks and things that you need to do, not necessarily knowing why you need to do them. And so it's not that this is perfect or imperfect. It's just like the transition is completely different, because on the other side, when you're a solopreneur, on your own. So there is a lot of freedom, but there is also a lot of everything, because
Yeah.
everything is on you. That was a significant shift and a challenge, I think, to overcome. And to be honest, I think it was also the right time in my life. Like if somebody had told me 7 years ago, you're going to be an entrepreneur, I'd say like, no, I'm not. So yeah,
All right,
probably
that's
the
great.
biggest challenge. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure. I in the teaching world, it's very like, structured and you get your breaks and you get paid whether you do the best or the worst. And I see, coming into this world of entrepreneurship as well, I'm like, wow, okay, if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. Like, and you have to do the best
Exactly.
because that is, so I totally could see how that would be really difficult. So the running wine mom, we start with a little fitness. What is your favorite way to stay active?
So I restarted running quite recently, and I completed successfully, because I finished it, race a couple of weeks ago. So I was very proud of that, because I only restarted like, a few months ago, and 5K, and I'm not 25 anymore. I'm a little over, the 30 bar, let's say, by a decade at least. So when you get back into a sport or an activity and everything, it's not as easy and as fast as you progress. Plus, your body is back there to say, oh, hey, this is a little bit like achy on this side and on this side. So I started running again. I walk a lot in general, so that's already kind of something that keeps me, in active mode. And I also restarted to do a little bit of yoga. I found a local class very near me that has a class every Sunday, very grounded in the community around my house. So that's really cool, and I'm liking like having this both type of exercise and fitness.
Yeah, and I think when you run, it's so important to do yoga as well with it to get that movement that some of us kind of forget to do.
Yeah,
So
it's
how does
balancing, it's complementing one another, I think.
For sure, for sure. So how does maintaining your fitness contribute to your relationship with mental health?
So I actually have several years ago now, over 10 years ago now, I had back pain and I had a back surgery. And so my back is my pain point, truly speaking. But after the surgery and everything, and believe me, because when you're stuck in pain, your mental health take a big toll. Because you cannot socialize, you cannot meet people, you're feeling like at your lowest. Not saying there are not other diseases, but it's really hard to be in pain like that. So, and then my surgeon told me, you can do any sport you like, no issue there, but the key is moderation. You can do anything. Like it was like telling me, maybe, like heavy weightlifting is not something you should do. I was like, that's okay. I won't do that. But he was like, you can run, you can play tennis, you can do whatever you want, but just never in excess. And that's something that was kind of stuck in my head, even on the mental health thing. Like, find balance in whatever you're doing. So you're running, but just don't run like, miles and miles, and not necessarily every day, and compensate with something else. And if you read a book, you don't have to read like 8 hours a day to finish your book. You just like find balance and rhythm in everything you do. So I find that, the fitness and also having some time to rest and not exaggerating in everything you do
Right.
is actually key to your mental health and a more balanced life.
Yeah, I love that. And so before we get into knitting more in depth, what do you think the relationship in knitting and mental health is?
So there is a path, and actually, so knitting is one aspect, but truly speaking, this is something that you can find as being advised on any platform which is trying to help people with mental health. Is about finding creative, crafting activities. Knitting is one of my choice, but I usually say, you do you. If you don't want knitting and you want to do something else, do something else. That's fine. It's going to help you. What I find with knitting though, as an advantage in comparing to other crafts, is that number one, it's very portable. You can have it in your bag. You can literally knit anywhere. Like anywhere. You don't have like a heavy gear to transport. I mean, you cannot do ceramic on a plane. You can knit on a plane. You're not going to paint in the subway. I mean, you can try painting in the subway if you want, but I don't necessarily recommend that. If you knit, you can knit in the subway. You can knit on the beach. You can knit in the mountain. When I'm going to the swim class of my daughter, I'm sitting there, I'm knitting. I see other parents, they're on their phone, which, so this is why I feel like it's a very practical, craft that you can have with you. You don't have a big setup to make. You can knit for 5 minutes and then put it back in your bag.
Yeah, I love that. That's so
that's the aspect that I find very convenient and practical there.
Yeah, and I never thought about how easy it is to just like throw it in your bag. And I think people really undervalue the creativity. I think we lose it like somewhere in our, whether it's our late 20s or early 30s. And it's just so important to get it back. Like, I feel like I lost it for a while. And then in the last maybe 5 years, it's started to really come back. And it's such a difference for my mental health. So unfortunately, I can't knit very well. I tried it. I went to a class.
Come to one of mine.
Yeah, I need to come to one of yours because I really would love to do it. And I went, and the teacher was great. And I was just like, I am not getting this. And it was getting frustrated. But I want to come to one of your classes for sure.
So, full disclosure, the first class or the first few, hours that you're going to start knitting, it's not the time where you're going to be relaxed. It's tense on your shoulder. You don't know what you do. You're just like, that's not where the mindfulness and the relaxation part come into play. You need to practice for that. But I guess it's a little bit like for any activity that you do. When you start a yoga class at the beginning, you feel like a complete, clown in there. You're the wrong leg is going up and then it's going on the side and you almost fall trying to find your balance. And little by little, you're improving and you know what you're supposed to do. You know what it's supposed to look like. So, there is no, it's not about perfection. It's about the journey. It's not about the destination, really, especially with knitting.
So before we get more into knitting, let's talk a little bit about parenthood. Tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I have a daughter, like I said, who is 8 years old. And I met my husband here in New York. He's Italian, so we are trilingual. I am the least trilingual of the triangle, but yeah. So she's 8 years old. She's going to a French American school here in Jersey City, and yeah.
What were you least prepared for in parenthood?
Everything. There is not. I think it's something that you need to invent a little bit every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because parenting and that's something which maybe there is a French aspect, cultural aspect on that, because maybe French culture is less looking into a specific style or specific method, or just, I'm not saying we go with the flow, but almost. And I think that is still with me. So I didn't like read books and say, oh, this is the method I want to use or something like that. I just go with the flow, which it's also because the kid you have in front of you at any age is a person on their own. And in parenting, there are things that it will work for a couple of days and then this is not working anymore. And you need to change that because you need your kid to go to sleep. And the method that you had for 3 days that worked really great doesn't work anymore. Or the other way around, it was not working and suddenly you try again and it works. And this is all about, the resilience and, the adaptation that you need to have, because you have an individual in front of you. Nobody comes with a manual. Us as adults, we don't have a manual, and the kids don't have a manual either. Yeah, there are things that we can improve and learn and find suggestions and tips, but we need to figure it all out. And that's the part where, as adults, as we grow and we study and we go to university and everything, we're not used anymore to kind of navigate the things with a surprise. Just like, this works this way. No,
well,
it
it's
doesn't.
Funny because, the main book that I read before I had kids about like parenting styles and prepping is called Bringing Up Baby. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it is about the way that the French raise their kids and how, and I'm like, it was the best book, honestly. Like, I don't know if it's true or not, but it essentially was like allow your kids to be bored. Like you can you can treat them like, they're a person essentially, not a baby, have them help you at like an early age. It all sounded a little silly, but also like I was like, but I love it. I want my kids to be doing this. And just how like, Americans, we have so much overconsumption. And I feel like I've really stuck to a lot of, the beliefs that whether they're true or not in the book, it kind of said, but like we bring our kids out, we allow them to be bored. They help with chores and we try not to buy them too many toys.
Yeah, I think, the other part on that is probably, so my husband is Italian, so it's probably like a similar approach to like education and parenting in general. So, but it's also the fact that, when you're like a family abroad as a one unit and you don't have, the grandparents around and everything, you have to work as a team. And the kids become part of the team. Not when
Yeah.
they are like 6 months old, of course not. But eventually they participate in everything. And most of my friends who have your expat, as we like to call ourselves, that's a little bit how it feels. It's just like, somebody has something to do, like the whole team is with them and behind. And yeah, when I do like, holiday markets for the knitting stuff, so she comes and she helps me. And then they will go by the day and do other things with my husband. And so it's also, it's not a family business because it's not her age or concern or anything like that, but she likes helping. She likes participating. We repainted a few walls in our house, last year and everything. She likes to have the role and help us doing that. We could have organized for her to be with some friends and have a play date and another play date and another play date, but it's also part of understanding we are getting a house and we all contribute to building this house together. So you can come and help. It's not that she has to paint all weekend long. No, she can go and do other things at some point, but she participates. For me, it was important that happened.
I love that. And so what's one piece of advice that you would give to other parents?
Trust yourself and do it one day at a time.
Yeah, that's
You
great
trust
advice.
yourself. I mean, the kids they are much more resilient than we think. And yes, when they are bored, they will come up with incredibly stupid ideas of things that they want to do. And you will be like, what happened in this little brain that you came up with that? But it's great. It's great. And yes, to let them, find and, the imaginative play and doing things and building, give them a box of Lego and they can figure it out. Not even the Lego with instructions sometimes, just the
Doing
box
it.
of Lego
Yeah.
with no instruction.
Right. Perfect. All right, so let's get into the knitting. Can you take us
Sure.
back to the moment when the idea of the Brooknit Bonneterie first spiked? And can you talk about what the
So,
name means?
yeah, so I'll start with the name and then I'll tell you how I get to that. So Brooknit Bonneterie. Brooknit is because at the time of the business idea and creation, we were living in Brooklyn in New York. So Brooknit, the Brook part of the name is from Brooklyn, and knitting, it's knit. So Brooknit made a lot of sense. Then I wanted to add like the French touch, and bonneterie is actually the French word for hosiery.
Okay.
So back to the stitches and everything with the sound of the bonnet, like the hat and the bonnet, beanie word. So I wanted to have all of that. I also use sometimes the acronym of BKB for naming the company, which is not overly used right now, but this is probably something that will be used more in the future. So how I got the idea, I like the fact that you mentioned at the beginning that you lost the crafting, creative side of yourself a little bit in your 20s or 30s. Exactly the same. When I was a kid, I was surrounded by makers. I grew up in the rural France, in the southwest of France. Grandmother were knitting. I had a neighbor who I considered like a grandfather who was repairing chairs with haze. So a lot of that, winemakers all around. A lot of things were very tangible of people working with their hands to make something. So that was one aspect. And myself, I was always like, sewing clothes for my Barbie dolls, making like, I did I don't know how many bracelets, like friendship bracelets I've made with, the little beads or the cotton strings, all of that. And then a little bit like you mentioned, probably when I was, student life and, studying and partying or partying and studying and then, relationships and friendships, I kind of lost that for a while. And it came back during the COVID years because we
Mhm.
were at home. We had, number one, we had no mask. So just like, I can sew a little, so I will make some masks for us. So at least we can,
Okay.
go by a little bit. It was not perfect, but it was like triple layer cotton things.
Right.
So that worked. And then my daughter at the time was 3.5. So there isn't so much you can do or have them to do on their own. So
Mhm.
I ordered everything you can imagine to have like craft supplies, pom-pom, beads, everything. And then I started to kind of reconnect with that. So I did that with her, and I reconnected with, the crafting and, manual activities.
Mhm.
And at some point I was just like, I should try knitting. I was not knitting until 2020. I should start knitting. So I ordered myself a little kit. I started, and I figured that with a lot of humility, I'm saying that, but I was really good at it in the sense that I was catching it really fast. I was trying other things. I was trying alternative, stitches and trying this and that. And that was clicking really fast. And this is how I got into the craft itself. And then there is I have a collaboration with a company in France, which I can talk a little bit later, but I was following them. There was a reorganization in my, I used to work for a big pharmaceutical company, corporate. There was a reorganization, and it was, the planets were aligning, and I'm just like, okay, it's time for a change. I spent 17 years, corporate, big pharma. It was the year I was turning 40, and I was just like, okay, it's now. So, and I decided to make the transition there.
So how was that transition from corporate to launching your own knitting business? Huge leap. What was the most surprising lesson you learned in the shift?
So first of all, I was lucky enough that it was a reorganization that was planned. So, I left with a separation package. So it was not like, like you see in the movie, you go one day and your badge doesn't work and you have a box and buy. It was not like that. I had 6 months to, first of all, I was made aware that, there was a change. I could have applied to other jobs internally. I had like a lot of support but, I decided that someone like, I'm done and I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
So the transition was kind of smooth because I had 6 months to prepare. So, before I left, I had the time to, like transition everything away from me, from the old job to the new person who was going to replace me. I mean, the different people were taking away the responsibility that I had. And then I could start knitting also in having a little bit of free time, and I could start knitting and keep on experiencing and taking notes about how I wanted the business to look like. I had plenty of ideas back then that I have not applied to the business today. And there are things that I didn't want to do that I'm actually doing. For example, the teaching and coaching in knitting, I was not planning on doing that, and I'm doing it.
Love that. So you grew up in the French countryside. How did your early experiences with your grandmothers influence your passion for knitting and design?
Yeah, like I said a little bit earlier, it's the grandmother who are knitting and sewing and making things. And then it's also, some other activities like winemaking or, gardening and growing your vegetables in your garden and stuff like that. So the influence is there because it's the kind of thing that, the relationship you have with those people and the memories you have with them. And there are all those little items like, a jacket or something that they have knitted for you that you cannot get rid of.
Right.
And it's kind of a token. It's not being materialist, but it's a token of something that they left. The fact that
Yeah.
they put so much love, and because knitting is a long like effort to make. It takes a lot of time. You have to be patient, especially when you do like these big sweater or cardigans.
Yeah.
And I still have some of them. And when you think about it, it's just like for somebody who is busy in their life, by the way, because, rural countryside for grandmother is not a spa day.
Right.
So for them to put so much time and of themselves into creating a piece for you, and I was not the only grandchild, by the way, we were like, 14. So each of
Yeah.
us probably has one or two pieces at least. It's kind of a proof of love and something that will stay with you. And I like this idea, when you work in corporate and everything, I was working on the digital side. I loved my job, but it's true that you work on one project and another project and another project and nothing really lasts. I'm not saying there is no contribution, it doesn't last. And this idea of, not complete legacy or something, but making something that is going to last, that's something that is appealing.
Right. Yeah, it's so important to do that. And I never thought of it that way. That 'cause now I'm like, oh yeah, nothing. If you don't have something at your job that is representing you that's going to get passed down for generations, then after you leave, you're kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, and just, my job was doing like, some tools for financial reporting in a
Right.
pharmaceutical company. So I was not like directly saving lives or doing massive, big research or something like that. So it's kind of the back office of the back office of the back office. And, none of the tool that I contributed to build back then are probably still in use right now. And that was just like 5, 6 years ago. So that's the cool part when you're in the job, because there is always something new and you're learning. But
Yeah.
it's also true that it doesn't really last.
Yeah. So in your kits, you emphasize like DIY and the joy of really making, like you kind of were just talking about. How do you believe that the act of knitting contributes to one's, a mental and emotional well-being? I know you kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, but once you kind of get the hang of it, what do you think?
So there are, several aspects that come into play there. I think the first one is the fact that if you think about somebody who has never touched a needle, who is trying it, and after 2 hours, they can knit. Because at the end, it's 4 moves that you need to figure out. 2 of them are exactly reversed, and the move itself is not that complicated. And when, after a couple of hours, they attend a workshop and they have made the first little square, and I can just tell them, you can knit. You're a
Yeah.
knitter. That's all it takes. I mean, then you will have to learn about variation, counting, and fine, but you can knit. And the simple fact that, being able to achieve something, to, learn something new and comprehend it, master it. Master is probably exaggerating right now, but, you can do it. You will remember it. You can continue. So there is this feeling of, your self-esteem is taking a boost because you've been able to do something. And that's the number one thing right as you start. I can see it with kids. I teach kids, and this is just fascinating. When they are able to do it after maybe 1 or 2 hours, they are just like, wow. Like you basically open the door to, infinite possibilities of what you can make. And that's one thing. Then there is like the fact that, and this is being studied, by universities and everything. You actually use different neuropaths in your brain.
Wow.
And it helps with, the coordination, and it also actually enable different parts of your brain, which are helping in problem solving, thinking outside of the box, which I don't really like that much the expression, but being like in creative problem solving, in, analysis, in being, yeah, all the cognitive skills also, pushed. And that brings a lot of additional satisfaction because you can think differently, because you can, find solutions to problems that you were kind of stuck. So it applies beyond, I like to say beyond the stitches, because I think that's the case. It's like it creates a situation where beyond the stitches, there is more to knitting. So there is that. And then there is another aspect, which is a craft that it can be as much a solo moment, like you're grounded in mindfulness, one stitch after the other. The repetition of the movement is very soothing. So there is a lot of mindfulness there, which is also helping a lot with, mental wellness. And that is also a part, which is very interesting. The other aspect is it can be solo craft. Mindfulness can also be social because you can share it with others and you can meet as a group. Or you can be like, even if you knit at home, you can be like connected to a Facebook group of knitters who are going to share their project. And suddenly somebody has a question and, hey, I know the answer to that. I can answer that. I can help somebody else. And this is something that people are looking for. We all like helping others in the end.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that it can be social or by yourself, whichever kind of mental health that you really need.
And there are
So
days you want to be,
alone. So your business combines French design with American practicality. How do you balance these two cultural aesthetics in your creation?
Yeah, so it's funny because I kind of didn't think of it this way at first, but I like the way you approached it, and I think there is a lot of truth in there. So I think the part of the French designs that I identify is the aspect of being timeless. I
Yeah.
like to create pieces that are not trendy for 6 months, because knitting is also like, a sustainable craft. It's also about slow fashion. It's also about things
Yeah.
that will last more than one season. And I like this idea of making pieces that can be, timeless, that you can reuse years after years and,
Yeah.
and maybe pass on to the next generation. That's one aspect of, on the French, touch maybe there.
I love it.
The practicality, I think, though I have to say that my partners in France are using the same kind of yarn, the practicality is also that all of the kits that I have, they use the same yarn. So it's a small business, upstate New York that, supply the yarn for me. And it's 100% merino wool superwash. And
Okay.
the choice of the yarn itself, of the wool, is actually important here. So it's an American yarn because I didn't want to get like into importing and exporting. And I'm really glad these days that I didn't get into that. So the yarn is from upstate New York. And merino is actually a fiber, which is a little almost magical. So it's a natural thermoregulator. And I think, the practicality for the US, especially me experiencing this, variation of temperatures, like the AC goes too strong and all of a sudden it's like super hot outside. So having items in a fiber that is actually, naturally thermoregulating. So you'll never overheat and you'll never get cold with that.
Cool.
It's warming up enough, but because it's actually, it's a moisture, the sheep, the merino sheep itself is coming initially from New Zealand, which has like very big variations of temperature. And
Hmm.
so it keeps you warm when it's cold, but it has the capacity to draw the moisture away so you don't sweat in it.
Oh, I didn't even know that was
Which
possible.
and that's a natural thing. It's not treated for that. It's naturally like that, which is interesting because when you start blending different fibers together, you may lose a little bit of that. Like if you
Hmm.
mix with acrylic, for example, you will not have the same level of properties. It's when it's pure that it works the best. And this is why they're starting to put merino in some of sportswear items.
Yeah.
So there is that. And the fact that when I said it's merino superwash is a specific treatment that makes the yarn, the wool, you can wash into the washing machine. You don't put in the
Never.
dryer, never in the dryer.
No, I
You
was
have to
saying
let
never
it
in the
dry.
dryer.
Yeah, never in the dryer, but you can wash in the washing machine. And because it's a natural fiber, you don't need to wash as often as, synthetic fibers because it doesn't
Okay.
retain the smells. So you can just air it out and the smell is gone. So unless you have
Okay.
a stain or something like that and you need to wash, that's fine. But you don't need to wash as often as that. When you
Wow.
live, I'm thinking New York a lot, in an apartment, like you have one sink and in the bathroom and one in the
Yeah.
kitchen. Yeah, you're not going to spend like, an entire afternoon washing your knitwear by
No.
hand and putting them everywhere in the flat for them to dry. So the fact that you have this convenience, and as you said, the American practicality probably of putting in the washer, you let it dry. Yes, you let it dry outside, fine. But it's already a little more convenient at a lot of things.
That's awesome. And so another part of your business is that you feel as though building a community is really central to your mission. How have your workshops and knitting clinics kind of fostered connection among participants?
So I have seen, first of all, I see first when people or like during the workshops or during the events or first of all, there is this bonding and sharing. People don't know each other most of the
Hmm.
time. I haven't done yet to places where a lot of people like they know each other, like they are a team already.
Hmm.
But it's interesting because you always have one who can maybe knit a little better or a little faster than the other. And then the
Right.
person next will say, hey, am I doing this right? And the other one like, yes, but you should do it like this. It's going to help you not have, the string of yarn on your way. Oh, okay. Thank you. So there is no competition. It's just bonding, sharing and helping. And there is always, because everyone has a little story of saying like, oh, I remember my grandmother used to knit this for me, or my mom did this for my kids, or And it's funny because you can see when people are telling these little stories that there is a little light in their eyes, a little, sparkle of things, like a memory that is coming back. That they don't get to speak about that often because it's not something you talk about all the time about, the grandmother knitting something, unless you're me, your job is knitting, then you speak about that all the time. But it's funny because it brings back something to people, a memory and some kind of reconnection to them. And I have seen people like exchanging numbers at the end of the workshop, like, I want to stay in touch with you. And they exchange numbers. I don't know if they are still friends or not, but it was really great. And I'm exploring the idea of having a WhatsApp community potentially with some of the students who are like, coming regularly to the workshops. Sip and Knit, or I'm opening another one soon, which is called, I will call Needles and Nibbles, because it's going to be at a cafe. So you can.
I love that.
So one is with the wine and the other one is more with the cafe and croissant.
Yeah. To all
But
people.
I will see if I want to do that, because I have to admit that it could feel a little counterintuitive that you want to disconnect from your phone and then you get back in your phone with a WhatsApp community. So I'm not anti-technology, but I also don't want to create a space and all of a sudden people are just like, no, you know what? I need to stop the notifications because it's too much. Yeah, that's not the goal. So if it can help people staying in touch and, asking a quick question and somebody else can help, I'm all for that. But I just also don't want this to be a burden on people who are part of it. We have all a lot of WhatsApp group, right? So especially as moms, I guess.
The idea of it is great for connection, but like I have had to step away from so many of them just because it's like it's too many notifications and I'm like, I need to answer and I can't keep up. And then, it's just a lot of, so there's there's advantages of it too.
So that's why I'm kind of exploring the idea, and I will ask, the students if they are interested or not, because if they are interested or not, that's totally fine. And I'll just keep that away.
Yeah. You see the setup. So also your kits kind of cater to various skill levels. How do you approach designing a kit that is both accessible to beginners and engaging for seasoned knitters?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are kits that are more like really for beginners and some others for seasoned, and some others are just, anyone. Because for even, the quick and easy sometimes can be very satisfying for a seasoned knitter. You just want to have like a quick project that you can, take with you in the bus or,
Right.
Something quick that you can have with you at all times. Sometimes, knitting a sweater and having it in your back can feel heavy. So it's nice to have things also on the go. But what I have done so far, which is something that I'm finding I like it a lot. So most of my kits and the designs that I've made are just with a single color, except the one with stripes, which have two colors. And the stripes are something that I advertise more for, not like expert knitters, because it's not that complicated, but you need to pay attention a little bit more. So I would say like with experience a little bit. But there is so much that you can do in terms of texture, that this is where I think it becomes interesting. So you can knit with a single color and have things which are done with the results. And it's funny because in knitting, so the knitting world call everything a stitch. Like they say the knit stitch, the purl stitch, and then they will go about the stockinette stitch and the moss stitch and the seed stitch. Well, technically speaking, you have actually only two, which is knit and purl. And the rest is creating a texture depending on how you combine those two in numbers and the wrong side and the right side and stuff like that. So it means that if you know knit and purl, you can knit a lot of different things. And when you start playing with texture, whether you do like, I don't know, a scarf, or you want to do a shawl, or you want to do a blanket, you can actually be very entertained, even as a seasoned knitter, just doing these kind of things, which are still probably a seasoned knitter will catch it faster in terms of what's the method to use, and a beginner can actually simply practice the stitches. It might take a little more time. There might be some mistakes, but that's okay. That's totally fine. So that's what I like to do now. I will probably get into like some color work in my kits later on, but for now I want to have a good basis of things that when you carry with you, because for me the portability of the craft is really important here. When you carry with you, you don't have like 5 balls of yarn in your bag, tangling themselves together in different colors And it's already knitting on my couch with 3 right now. It's a mess all the time. So if you have it in your bag, that's complicated. And then you don't enjoy it anymore because you spend more
Right.
time untangling.
Unraveling it.
Yeah. So that's why I like, the texture aspect. So some of them are easier than others, but technically speaking, the building block is always the same. Knit or purl.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I remember learning about those. How that
Yeah. Yeah.
so one thing we talked about when we were at the Baby Foodie event are your swaddle cocoons. Can you talk a little bit about them? They're so
Sure.
adorable.
So the swaddle cocoons are coming actually from the partnership I have with a French company. So the company, it's a small business in France run by 2 women. It's called Ma Petite Laine. And one of the founder of Ma Petite Laine, one of them is actually the sister of one of my best friend. The other,
Good.
and the other one, she's a pediatric physical therapist. And she
Okay.
created initially the cocoon for her own kids.
Okay.
And it looks like a sock. Okay. And it's like some people call it a baby sack or something like that, and it's basically a sock. But the benefit of that, the concept is gentle swaddling. So one of the big difference between France and the US is in France, nobody is advising anyone to swaddle. People don't
Interesting.
swaddle their babies. It's not a recommendation. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's the case, that there is no pediatric recommendation to swaddle. In the US, you're strongly recommended to swaddle. I can tell you that didn't work for my daughter. She hated it. She's half Italian, half French. You take the hands away, I guess this is not going to work for her.
Yeah, seriously.
So, and it's true that if you think about it, when the babies are, in the womb, in utero, they have access to their hands.
Yeah.
They have a little bit of mobility. And all of a sudden we say, it's a better transition. And you're like this and you don't have the hand. It's just like, I'm wondering, it's just like, where are my hands?
Right. Where'd
And
they
I'm
go?
not sure and I know it works for some babies, like they fall asleep much better, they stay asleep much longer. Now, swaddling is also, you need to make sure that you do it really well because it can cause issues with the hips and things like that. The cocoon that we have has different components. Number one, the elbows are it's containing but not constraining. So the elbows are contained, but they have access to their hands if they want to. So they can. There is a little bit of freedom of movement. And the fact that the elbows are contained, it's containing the startle reflex that is waking them up, suddenly and then scare them and then they start crying. Because it's contained, they actually are falling back asleep on their own.
Okay.
So they can sleep better and longer. The cocoon has a shape which is rounded at the bottom. So the babies can be in a flexed position while on their back. And now for the moms here who have been through that and colics and everything, we all know when babies are suffering from colics, they cannot sleep on their back. Terrible for them. And they need to have the legs flexed. And you can try, by the way, at home. I'm not going to do it here, but you can try falling asleep on your back, flexing your legs. This isn't working.
No.
So there is that, and the fact that the top of the cocoon is rolling out, so it can never be on the way of breathing. So it's extremely safe.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, the yarn that we use is Merino superwash, so it's never like overeating. They are using it in the summer in French and in the Caribbean, the French Caribbean.
Oh.
Because the babies, you can have the baby, it's super soft and the Merino is also doesn't report any skin allergy. Yeah. So you can have the baby, even with sensitive skin, just basically in their diaper.
Right.
And not wearing anything else. And they won't sweat and they won't be cold. And that's among like the key benefits. Those are the ones. And then there are others. The fact that it's safe and the hands are free makes it also an item that you can use up until 6 months. Because when the baby is rolling over, the hands are free. So it's not dangerous.
Yeah. Wow.
All of those things are, coming into play. It's a little magical.
Yeah.
I'm actually the only one having the cocoon, the French version of the cocoon here in the US. We have an exclusive partnership together on that. We don't do import and export. It's, I give them a percentage of my sales, on those ones, but the yarn is coming from the US and we make it in the US. It's available as a kit or it's available hand knitted, which so far I knit myself.
Oh, wow. That is so neat. Like, how cool is that to have knowing like this came from you. I love that. Um,
Thank you.
and I think that is, I'm like all the like startling, movements, all that's coming back to me. I'm like, it hasn't been
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
while, but like, oh my gosh.
It's like, and you don't miss that, right?
No, no, I do not. So, wow, you have told us so much. I've learned so much about knitting. I know all the listeners have. When you look back years from now, what do you hope your business, knitting, it has left behind, not just, in the world of knitting, but in the lives of the people who picked up your kits and or have attended one of your events?
In terms of what I would love to hear one day is like one of the students that I have in the enrichment class is now a mom, and she's teaching her kids how to knit, and she tells, oh, I learned that in school in my enrichment class, and my teacher was Julie. And
I
I
love
would love
that.
that to happen.
Yeah.
I would love that. I would love for, somebody that might have been suffering from any kind of, because I'm opening programs for education, for B2B, but also for healthcare providers to offer it as a service.
Hmm.
There is a lot of, giving back that comes into play here. I would love to be able to run a circle of knitters in an hospital where people have like long hour treatments. Like I'm thinking cancer patients, but it can be some other
Right.
things. Instead of scrolling on their phone while they're all waiting or receiving the treatment, we can be a group together and do that. And whatever that can be, I would love that at some point someone who was being in any kind of pain can say to another person in pain, you should try knitting. I did that and that helped me. And I'm not saying knitting is a therapy. I'm not a therapist. I'm just saying that it's a therapeutic tool that anybody can put in their wellness toolbox, and that can help. I'm not saying it's gonna help everybody. You pick what you like, but it can. Nobody ever said, I regret learning how to knit. Like, never.
Yeah.
Never heard that. So you learn, you try, you see if it's for you. That's the kind of thing that, and yes, this idea of people thinking about how they learn and how it helped them or how it contributed to do something for them. That's what I'm hoping for, honestly.
And I know that's how it will be. Well, that's great. And I think that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of The Running Wine Mom. Julie, your story is such a beautiful reminder that it's
Thank
never too
you.
late to start something new and that making your hands can heal what the world wears down. So thank you for telling everyone all about knitting and coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you, Samantha, for having me. I hope your auditors will like it.
Yes. So, to the listeners, if today's episode inspired you, I'd love if you would take a moment to rate, review, and share it with a fellow mom, maker, or friend who could use a little creativity in their cup. As always, thank you for spending time with us on The Running Wine Mom. You can also follow me on Instagram at The Running Wine Mom _. And Julie, where can the listeners find you?
So they can find me on Instagram with Brooknit Bonneterie. That's my account. They can find me as Julie Lagaüzère on LinkedIn, where I post a lot around mental health and knitting benefits there. I share a lot of that. They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on my website. Where else? They can find me at a sip and knit that we are running sometimes. I have accounts on Linktree. I'm also on, for the knitters out there, I also publish some of the patterns alone on Ravelry, which is a big website for knitters and crocheters. And some of the patterns are available through that, so they can find me there.
Cool. And I will link all of that. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for joining us today. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are all amazing. Until next time, keep running, keep sipping, and keep embracing the joy of motherhood. Cheers, and I will be back next Tuesday.